Alright, so I've made 20 of these what I'm calling compression tube alignment buttons. I don't know what they're called officially or if they have a name. That sounds good to me though. Got my spars laid out on my table here. I've got an initial set of holes drilled. 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 1 near the root. Same in the main spar. This is the right upper wing. These are the spars for the right upper wing. That's the way I'm going to build first. The instructions, they take you to the upper wings first, so I thought I'd just start with the upper wings. And I chose the right one. I've got different brackets that I've made, and these are what are called scab plates. What you do, you slide all the ribs onto the spars, and then you put the scab plate in place, epoxy it. This then, there's one bolt hole here, there's one I'll drill here, and then there's a countersink here. Actually, here's the same thing, I've got the button on there already. That bolts here and here to the spar, and there'll be another one opposite it, and the compression tube, which is a 3/4 inch aluminum tube, will go between those, and it'll just sit over this button. And you've got the same thing here, 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 and the one at the root I think is wood. That'll epoxy to the butt rib. The scab plates, you got to have the ribs on first. You got to make sure everything is in order. Then epoxy that. If you put this on, if I epoxy this on right now, I can't slide ribs on. If I have a scab plate here, 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 and there, I can't put any ribs on. I can put a butt rib on, and I guess I could put the outwardmost rib on, but I need more than that. So these won't get epoxied until down the road. What I'm going to do now, these brackets go on the rear spar, these brackets go on the front spar. I've got 2 holes drilled here and just 1 here. And here's the reason. Actually, let me start by explaining it with one of these little guys. So I've drilled a pair of holes here, here, here. Let's just take this one for example. This center hole is simply, it's countersunk, and it's simply for this screw that goes through and sits into the countersink and holds the button in place. I got a hole here. Here's what I'll do. I'll put that on there. I'll put a bolt through this hole and bolt it in place. Then what I'll do, I'll flip this upside down, and I'll put probably some aluminum or wood underneath to pad it. I'll put a transfer punch through that hole, and I'll whack it with a hammer. That'll give me a nice dimple right here, so I can drill a hole in precisely the correct location, so that these 2 holes will line up perfectly with the 2 holes I've already drilled in the spar. The 1 hole, you can just drill it in approximately the right location. If I drill both of them right now, just based on the dimensions in the plan and based on a ruler and scribing, very little chance they would line up precisely with those holes. So I bolt it in place, turn it over, put a transfer punch in there, and this is a set of transfer punches. I'll just grab one here, and see if the camera will focus. Yeah, so it's smooth along its length, same diameter. You just get it the same diameter as that hole that I drilled. And then it's got, yeah, this isn't focusing too well. There it is. It's got the point on the end. So this should fit nice and snug in that hole. Whack it, and it'll put a dimple. It'll transfer precisely the hole here to a point on whatever you're transferring to. So if that makes sense. Bolt that on there, slip this in the hole, whack it. Then I'll drill that hole slightly under 1/4 and ream it to 1/4. Then that's done. then this piece will have to stay with this location. Because if I try to put it on somewhere else, the holes probably wouldn't line up precisely. Alright, these brackets will go something like, let's see here, something like right there, and right there. So we've got one hole through here. I'll need to do the same transfer punch thing to this plate and to this plate. Drill those holes and ream those holes, and then we'll have two bolts that go through there and there. This middle hole right here, there isn't one in this plate. I'll countersink this one, and I'll have a screw go through it, and I'll have my alignment button right there. So this one, I'll do a transfer punch and have another hole here, and this will be held in the center. This one will just have the one additional hole right here for the second bolt to go through. So one bolt right here, a second bolt here and here that I'll drill and ream after I do the transfer punch thing. Still need to countersink this one, and it'll just have the button on there. Same thing with these. I got one hole here, one hole here. I'll run a bolt through there, one at a time. Whack it with a transfer punch, undo it, bolt this one on, whack it with a transfer punch, drill and ream those holes. Then here I'll countersink this hole, and it'll have a button on there. This button and the button there, there'll be a compression tube that those buttons hold on to and line up and keep in alignment, hopefully forever. So these are a little more complicated. I've got a hole to drill. I've got to punch and drill through both of these, and then a countersink and bolt and punch and drill and ream both of these. These are a little simpler. Just bolt it, punch it, and drill it. And these are already all countersunk, so these little ones are simpler. I've got brackets that I've made for the roots, and they're already painted even. They're going to be internal, they're hidden, so they're not going to be my final paint, but they have the zinc phosphate paint on the green paint that internal metal parts are commonly painted on planes. Those don't have an aluminum compression tube, and these buttons go between them, so I believe those are already all drilled. So I believe what I'll do is run a bolt through this one hole with the bracket or brackets in place, just one bracket I suppose, and then use a transfer punch through the bracket to mark the wood, and then drill the wood for the other holes in the bracket. There's like 3 or 4 holes in each one, I don't remember. So those are all different. Those don't have this and the countersink. I still have more holes to drill in the wood though, which will be based on the holes I drilled in those brackets. So that's a little different. I'll be drilling the wood, not the brackets here. After I do all that, I'll flip this thing upside down, because these brackets, you get the interplane strut that goes between the upper wing and the lower wing, that bolts on here. Wires bolt on here and go down to the fuselage. From the lower wing, you'll have something similar, a wire that goes from here up to the cabane strut, I think it's called. That's why you've got these funky brackets here. So because I've got these things protruding down, I can't assemble this wing right side up because these brackets will hit the table. So I'll need to flip it upside down so I can bolt these brackets in place, and the wing will just lie flat on the table. It'll lie on the upper cap strip of all the ribs, and then I can assemble it with these brackets protruding up out of the wing. So this wing will be built upside down. The lower wings, I assume, will be built the opposite way. I didn't read in the plans yet about assembling the lower wings, but on the upper wings he says line up the spars at, I think he says line them up at this first set of holes, because remember the wing is swept, so the roots aren't going to line up because of the sweep. So I think he says line up these holes together, clamp them together, and then mark where each rib goes. So, and he says do that on the bottoms. That was my point. Do that on the bottoms of the spars. So when it comes time to mark those, I'll flip these spars upside down, clamp them together, mark out where all the ribs go, so that those lines are identical on both sets of spars. Then these will be upside down, and I'll put all the ribs on. Epoxy on these scab plates, and you've got small ones for these guys and bigger ones for these and great big ones at the root. Epoxy those in place, start bolting the brackets on, measuring the compression tubes so that those are a perfect length between the scab plate, the bracket, scab plate and the bracket. Got to fit precisely between these two plates, here, here, and here. So I'll need to cut that 3/4 inch tube to length. I'll cut it a little long, and then I'll just sand it on the oscillating. I'll have a miter gauge clamped to the table on the oscillating belt sander, and that'll give me a nice perpendicular end on those tubes, and I'll shave off just a hair at a time until those fit perfectly in between the ribs, or in between the spars. 3 of them for this one. So that's what I need to do. That's the plan. I think I understand it pretty well. Eventually then I'll need to fit a smaller aluminum tube for the wingtip bow that forms the rounded shape of the wingtip. And like I said, the butt rib, I'll epoxy a piece of spruce to that, which will run between the spars, and it'll act as the compression tube there. Also on these clamps there'll be little brackets coming off that'll hold the drag wires. The drag wires will go between these two, between those two, here, and there as well, I think. So that'll be something else hanging off of these brackets that will get bolted. When I put the bolt through here, it'll go through that gizmo first. Still need to make those. Then you've got a thin sheet of aluminum. I got to form the leading edge. The trailing edge, I think, came pre-formed, which will save me a little work. I'm not sure how the leading edge gets held in place. A bunch of little wood screws came with the wing metals kit, so maybe it gets screwed on. I know the leading edge comes up here, and you leave it long enough to come down just a little bit behind the front spar. Maybe I'll bend that all the way down, and maybe it gets screwed in here. I'm not sure. So I'll have to form that curve. And then I'll need to glue. So if I've got a rib here, I'll need to glue a corner block here, here, and then 4 back here. After the wing's built and everything's adjusted, I epoxy 2, 4, 6, 8 of those corner blocks in place on every rib. So that'll be fun. A lot of epoxying. But once it's built, adjusted right, correct shape, it's in alignment, that's when you glue those in place, or epoxy them in place, because it's going to be less mobile then. So after I've got the compression tubes the right length, adjusted the drag wires. That's called trammeling the wing. You trammel it by tightening screws on the ends of this drag wire, or nuts, and tighten or loosen the nuts on the end of this drag wire. There's a nut on each end. And you do that until I get a perfectly square section right here. Same thing with these drag wires. Adjust those nuts until this individual box is a perfectly square section. That's called trammeling the wing. After I've done that, and I've got the wing as square and aligned as I can get it, I glue all those corner blocks in place. That's the deal. So I'll do that for both the upper wings, and I've got the spars ready to go for both upper wings and both lower wings already as well. Do that for both upper wings, and the lower wings I'll have to do something similar. Additionally, I'll have to mount the ailerons, which is more work, and I need to get my milling machine so I can make some of the parts that are required for mounting the ailerons. So that'll be fun. I'm not being sarcastic either, that'll actually be cool. So, but mounting the ailerons will be a little bit tricky, and it's super critical. So that'll be a challenge, I think. But I think I'll enjoy it. So, that's the plan. I'm going to start doing what I just described to you, getting these brackets ready, punching these holes, and using these transfer punches, and then drill and ream each one after I punch it. And then for one of each of these brackets, I'll need to countersink that hole. And for this one as well, I need to countersink that hole. Make sure I countersink it on the right side. That'd be a huge mess. I'd need to remake it if I countersunk on the wrong side. So I gotta think before I do something. I'm not good at that usually, a lot of times. So think, then countersink. So that's the plan. So I put a bolt through here. I didn't put a nut on it, I just put a bolt through it so it was lined up. Then I lined this up properly. These three holes should be parallel. And you can see I scribed them earlier on when I was transferring the dimensions or the locations for the holes from the plans. Those three holes should be parallel to the spar. And for this bracket, that puts this top part at an angle. That top part's not like this. It's more like that. So I lined it up, dropped a bolt through there, punched it, and I got a hole here. I wasn't even thinking. I won't. I don't think I'll drill those separately. I think I'll just clamp them together like this to the drill press, and then just drill and ream those together. That's my plan. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. No reason to punch those separately. If I do that, I risk an alignment error like this. Of course, the presumption is that these holes are perpendicular to this plane, which I think they are. We'll see. I'm very, very happy to say that seems to have worked. I'm relieved. So, actually, this is the direction that this spar faces relative to that spar. So this plate actually needs to be the plate on this side, and then I'll countersink this right here for the screw to stick through that way to hold the compression tube alignment button. But the bolts fit through. I didn't have to force them or pound them with a hammer. They seem to align quite naturally. So that makes me happy. I'll just keep doing that. I'll do it on this one, and then I'll do it on these little guys. And it actually shouldn't take too long. That one went real quick. So this is the right upper wing. I've fitted all 7 ribs to it, not the butt rib, but all the 7 regular truss type ribs. And I had to do a little trimming, and the plans actually say you might need to. Just a little bit of trimming in different places to get the ribs to be able to sit comfortably when the wing is swept at a 6-degree angle and not bind. So they're all go on there now without being forced. Just use a razor blade. I just used a razor blade and spent a little while, and I got to be patient because you don't want to trim off more than you need to. I trimmed off just a tiny bit in different places so that the ribs would all slide on without being forced and sit at the proper angle. So this is all 7 ribs. I'll need to epoxy all the scab plates on now. The fittings are outside. The primer's drying. I still need to. I think I'll probably get a paint gun because the brackets that show, I want to go ahead and paint those the final color because I won't really have a chance to do a good job when it's all put together. So I think now's the time to do that. And then I need to make all the little fittings that hold the drag wires, those guys right there. So I still have a bunch of work to do really before this will go much further. But it's cool to see this put together. So I'll just keep chipping away at it.